brought to life. So God is doing something phenomenal for us. But for us, it's about being fat. Say fat. And these things he's promised to those that are fat. He told us that, hey, I'm going to do something special for fat people. You know, that made me smile. I said, thanks, Lord. Skinny people don't get all the glory. You still helping the fat boys. He said, I'm going to do something for fat people. So now we go back and we reflect on what God said about being fat and what that means. Go to Romans chapter 12, verse 1. And God said through Paul, I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies, somebody say bodies, a living sacrifice. So God is expecting us to put our fat on a flame. He's expecting us to bring our lives as an oblation to him. Psalm 22:29 in the King James Version. Remember, we read it. Fat folk gonna eat. Well, we knew that. Gonna eat and worship. That meant that they were going to be satisfied and intimate with God. That meant that they were going to be mighty, powerful, prosperous, and purposeful people. So when we begin to look at God's process of fat, we begin to understand that he wasn't talking about body weight. He was talking about the virtue that surrounds our lives. And that it was the fat that produced the aroma that pleased God. Go back to Leviticus 17. Leviticus chapter 17, verses 6 and 7. And the priest shall sprinkle the blood upon the altar of the Lord at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, and burn the fat for a sweet savor unto the Lord. Thank you. And they shall no more offer their sacrifices unto devils, after whom they have gone a whoring. This shall be a state forever unto them throughout. Somebody, a statute throughout their generation. Somebody say forever. This shall be a statute throughout their generations forever. So now he's telling us, I told you last week that we are no longer, verse 7 of Leviticus 17, we're no longer supposed to bring our sacrifice unto devils. False god, the hairy goat. Remember I told you the Egyptians called him Mendez, but the Greeks called this hairy goat, this tall goat with horns and cloven feet, this demon god. The Greeks called him Pan. It's where we get the English word panic. And so God is saying to us, do not sacrifice to the prince of panic, but to the prince of peace. Most of us, we sacrifice to panic. And what does that mean? That means that we begin to try to take things into our own hands. We begin to try to figure out what's supposed to happen. We try to think for God. And in some cases, we try to tell God that it ought to happen a certain way. And then if it don't happen a particular way, then they're not going to accept what God says. It's called panic. It's us not releasing ourselves or relieving ourselves from the pressure of certain things having to all be lined up like ducks in a row in order for us to believe the thing that God has said. If God speaks to you and tells you it is well, tell somebody it's well. If God speaks to you and says it is finished, tell somebody it's finished. If God speaks to you and says I've done it, then believe God's done it. It doesn't mean that everything's going to look perfect as you approach the situation, but by the time you get there, it's going to already be taken care of. And if you would just do what God told you to do and quit trying to tell everybody else how they're supposed to help you do what you're supposed to do. God has graced you to do what he's asked you to do. And if you don't panic, you'll get what you asked for. So God is saying that he wanted us. He told the Levites to give him the fat. And the fat is the thing that covers everything else. It's the thing that covers all the other body parts. And we've already talked about that. So then we began to ask, well, what's this fat? What is fat? Fat is being faithful, accountable, and teachable. It's an acronym that brings God a sweet smelling savor, faithfulness, accountability, and teachability. It's the thing that allows God to take you from dimension to dimension, from faith to faith, and from glory to glory. It's a part of being in a covenant with God. Remember, I told you that faithfulness meant commitment, dedication, and devotion. It's a type of covenant with God that you say, God, I'm with you, and no matter what goes down. That's why Job said in his word, though thou slay me, yet will I trust in thee. I can't give my hope to nobody else but to Jesus' blood and his righteousness, because I understand that there's nothing else I can lean on. There's nothing else that I can depend on. And we begin to talk about faithfulness, and some of you got real ticked off about me talking about tithing, but it's the proof of your faithfulness. So ain't no way in the world I was going to scream about it last week and not mention it again this week. So go to Malachi chapter 3, verse 8, real quick. We're going to go quickly. Will a man rob God? Yet you have robbed me. But you say, wherein have we robbed thee? And God said, in tithes and offerings. Tell somebody that's not faithful. Okay, go to Malachi 1, 6 through 8, real quick in the Message Bible. Isn't it true that a son honors his father and a worker his master? So if I'm your father, where's the honor? If I'm your master, where's the respect? God of the angel armies is calling you on the carpet. You priests despise me. You say, not so. How do we despise you? By your shoddy, sloppy, defiling worship. You ask, what do you mean defiling? What's defiling about it? When you say the altar of God is not important anymore, worship of God is no longer a priority, that's defiling. And then verse 8 goes on to say, and when you offer worthless animals for sacrifice in worship, animals that you're trying to get rid of, blind and sick and crippled animals, isn't that defiling? Try a trick like that with your banker or your senator. How far do you think it will get you? God of the angel armies asks you. And then we began to look at Malachi chapter 1, 13 through 14 in that same Message Bible. And he says, and when you say I'm bored, this doesn't do anything for me. You act so superior, sticking your noses in the air. Act superior to me, God of the angel armies. And when you do offer something to me, it's a hand-me-down or broken or useless. Do you think I'm going to accept it? This is God speaking to you. A curse on the person who makes a big show of doing something great for me, an expensive sacrifice, say, and then at the last minute brings in something puny and worthless. I'm a great king, God of the angel armies, honored far and wide, and I will not put up with it. So when we talk about being faithful, God said where your heart is, where your treasure is, your heart will be also. So if we're unwilling to bless God and to honor God with our finances, we can believe the rest of us ain't coming either. You might put a show on it for a minute, but it will dissipate. But I got good news for you. Malachi chapter 3, verses 10 through 12 in the same Message Bible, or the King James first. He says, bring all your tithes into the storehouse, that there may be meat in mine house. And prove me now herewith, saith the Lord of hosts, if I will not open you the windows of heaven and pour you out a blessing, that there shall not be room enough to receive it. And I will rebuke the devourer for your sakes, and he shall not destroy the fruits of your ground, neither shall your vine cast her fruit before the time in the field, saith the Lord of hosts. And all nations shall call you blessed, for you shall be a delightsome land, saith the Lord of hosts. There's a benefit to doing what God says. Same thing in the Message Bible. I'm going to read it very quickly because I want you to get this. I can't leave this alone. Bring your full tithe to the temple treasury, so there will be ample provisions in my temple. Test me in this and see if I don't open up heaven itself to you and pour out blessings beyond, somebody say, your wildest dreams. Verse 11, for my part, I will defend you against marauders, protect your wheat fields and vegetable gardens against plunderers, the message of the God of the angel armies. You'll be voted happiest nation. You'll experience what it's like to be a country of grace. God of the angel army says so. The difference between serving God and not serving him. So in other words, if you've done that, you haven't been faithful, it's a good time to repent. It's a good time to tell God you're going to get back to business, and you watch your life turn back around. You watch the difference between serving him and not serving him. You watch the difference between trusting him and not trusting him. If you're a person that loves God and you worship God, you haven't even been able to sleep good at night because you know you haven't been tithing. You haven't been faithful in the thing that God had determined for you to be faithful in. But tell somebody that once I start tithing, I'm going to get my sweet sleep back. I'm going to be able to rest my head. I'm going to be able to depend on God like I'm supposed to. But when you know you ain't giving God your best,